Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to another episode of the No Fluff MSP Marketing Podcast. Today, I am super excited. I have a guest that I'm surprised it's taken this long to get on the podcast, so I'm super happy to have him on. It's Paco Lebron from Prodigy Techs and TechCon Unplugged and MSP Unplugged and all the things. What's up, Paco?
Man, say that 3 times fast. No, things are good, my friend. Better than good, better than most, as I like to say. Things are
Oh,
good.
good, man. Well, I appreciate you being on, man. This is I'm excited about this one. You've got a lot going on. You do a lot of things. So, obviously I've been on your podcast. I talk about your podcast. I talk about your event. It's cool to officially have you on the podcast. I'm sure most of the listeners are probably already familiar with kind of who you are and definitely your podcast and event. But you're also an MSP.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
I
kind of your
am.
core thing, right? I mean, you are running an MSP. You've got employees. You are growing. You look great. That's your core thing, and then you do these
Yeah.
additional things.
Yeah, absolutely. So and by the way, thank you. We're also a faithful listener of yours as well, and I appreciate all the highlights that you give us and stuff. I just listened to your last episode about cross-selling. It was like, hey, this is the event, this is what I did, and here's the point, and I think
Yeah,
I appreciate how you, again, there's that no fluff, right?
yeah,
So that's definitely my one of my go-tos that I look forward to when they pop out in my drive.
nice,
Definitely want to
man.
listen to in there for all of those. And again, you do a lot of great content. You've done a lot of great uh, um, appearances for us. You've done a lot of great, just great human beings. So appreciate you doing that for us as well for TechCon. But
Dude,
yeah,
thank you. Appreciate it.
yeah. So I run an MSP called Prodigy Techs out of downtown Chicago. Chicago proper for my Illinoisans that are here, because everyone likes to say they're from Chicago, but they're like 30 miles west of Chicago and they're in like neighboring suburbs. So but I am in Chicago proper, in the West Loop specifically, for those who know the area, right? About a couple blocks away from the global headquarters of McDonald's.
Oh,
But yeah, been running that for 12 years. Ran it as a solopreneur for 7 of those 12 years. The last 5 years, we expanded to employees, and that was that was a very big milestone in itself. But yeah, I've been doing that. Our primary focus is obviously in the cybersecurity field with managed services. I personally believe you can't be an MSP nowadays without offering security. It's just a disservice that you're providing to your clients unless you have some type of way of how you're doing it that I'm curious to hear. But yeah, that's what we do in particular verticals of construction, manufacturing, and employment law, and specifically in the Latino sector. So we've actually partnered with a lot of associations that have primarily gone into these industries, but have tried to pivot and pioneer for the Hispanic population. And so that's what we've found some success in, just being of being Puerto Rican descent. That allows me to have some of that rapport, which we have this thing where in our culture, if you see someone like yourself, you immediately think your family. So how can we help each other, right? And that's just the nature of how it is from there. And that's where we found a lot of success outside of partnerings with some bigger MSPs and such to kind of drive that focus. But February will be 12 years for that. And yeah, that's my main daily driver. And MSP Unplugged is slowly coming up to being one of those equal parts as well. But I have a business partner with that one. That'll be, for those who have listened, Rick Smith over at Renactus Technology, who also owns his own MSP. And he's out of Newark, New Jersey. So we're both running that business. And then we do have an additional co-host who just joined us, Corey Kirkendall, out in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, I know Corey. Yeah, he's an MSP. Can't remember. Met him. I saw him at TechCon. Oh, wow, that's cool. So he's also going to be a host on the podcast.
Yep, we racked out a couple episodes recently. He will be he's a permanent host. And so he's been helping us with great content and just really diving right in, while me and Rick, look into what are the next phases of the business operations itself, and
Yeah.
how this thing we are trying to provide value to those that are of the sub $3 million MSPs, less than 20 employees. How can we provide them value so that they can compete or just sustain a lifestyle like some of the big boys out here?
Yeah. God, that's awesome, man. And I love how specific you are with who you serve. And that's so often missed. And you say, hey, these are the three main verticals, and we primarily go after, Latina sector. because of X. Like, that's so good. And then like TechCon, or sorry, MSP Unplugged. We service under 3 million, under 20 employees, which is the niche you guys serve so well. Like in the conference, it's so well geared towards those people.
Yeah.
And that's just so great that you have that mindset of like, who exactly am I serving? That's what makes this podcast so easy. And like y'all's podcast so much easier because you know exactly who you're serving. Like, we're primarily serving either the owner in episodes or the marketing coordinator in other episodes. And sometimes the salesperson. Like, we're talking to 3 different personas, and in the podcast, you kind of know who we're talking to, right? Like,
Right.
so it's good that you do that and think that way. Yeah, I was kind of wondering, how do you, one other thing I kind of like about this podcast is it's almost morphing into an entrepreneurial podcast. Like, one of my favorite podcasts is what is it? It's one of my favorites. I forget the name of it. Oh my God. With Guy Raz. It's How I Built This.
Okay.
Oh my God, so good. Like, so I just love the entrepreneurial journey. And you started in MSP. It's been 12 years. Then you had an idea for MSP Unplugged. How long have you been doing that?
Sure. Yeah. So that's been 10 years, but I can't take credit for all fully on there. I had a former business partner where we both belonged to another podcast network. And so our concept was we could do it a different way in a different style. And so we actually, so I don't know for some people who don't know this, but we actually formed TechCon Unplugged first before MSP Unplugged came about.
Oh, wow.
So it was actually done by me and my former business partner, Jeff Hallish, who have since sold his computer repair business. But we just it's a longer story and not probably for this show, but essentially from the many of splintering of things, me and him decided to throw an event of our own style, not necessarily in association to the podcast network we were a part of. And it was such a great hit in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where we said, I think we could probably just do this on our own. And so what we did was we then left our respective shows from that network, combined them in a sense, and created MSP Unplugged podcast. And then the business of MSP Unplugged kind of wrapped into TechCon Unplugged. But that was for about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And then he was part-time in his business. He was working full-time for Ford. So, there was so much going on at the time. So he decided to sell off his computer business and exit. So that's when I brought in Rick in 2021 and end of 2021. And then we've kind of carried that mantle moving forward.
Wow. So you're an OG. I mean, you were doing podcasts were like, cool.
According to Amy Luby, we are the longest running MSP podcast that she's aware of. And I take her word for it because she is a veteran of the space. So, if there's anyone's word I take, it's hers, Eric Simpson, and Carl Palachek. I feel like those 3, have seen it all, been through it all. And so for her to say that, which much love to Amy Luby. For those that don't know, I believe she's over at Helped now, if I'm not mistaken, of the time of this episode. So,
Man, that's badass. And I can tell because, like, when I listen to y'all's podcast, just the way you are as a host, it's like, okay, this guy's got years of experience. You can just kind of tell based on how you keep the conversation flowing, how you deliver lines with emphasis. Like, that is not natural. It's not like a natural ability people just have. It's like clear, like, okay, this human has a lot of experience in this thing. And now I'm really connecting the dots that it all makes sense. And, when I think about like MSP Camp, we started the podcast before MSP Camp was even a thing. And then we launched a service that the listeners have like kind of latched onto, which has been I'm so grateful. But it's also helped to monetize the podcast where I can keep doing it. Right. And I was kind of curious, do you guys have any ability to monetize? Like, how are you guys making money with doing a podcast? Because I know firsthand how much time and effort and work this is. Now, granted, when I get an email or a message or a text from someone saying how much it helped them, that gives me that motivation to keep going. Sure. But it's also nice to have a monetary incentive to keep doing something. So, like, are you able to monetize it? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, so good point, right? So like, it truly is a labor of love, right? Because, does it pay anywhere near as much as what the MSP does? Absolutely not. But, it's not really the reason why we do it, right? And there's a lot of stories for those who have listened to some of my past episodes. I just know of how hard I struggled to get to my primary goal. And for me to say, all right, well, if I can get to this place, I know others can go, because I'm not the brightest crayon in the box. So my thing is like, if I got to where I am now and people are looking to get where I am, or maybe even halfway of where I got, because I remember listening to other MSPs that were about half my size, and they were just like, man, I would love to get to that point. And I was part-time business owner working a full-time job. And so the unique part for me was like, all right, I've been through this journey of what an MSP owner has probably been through. They're part-time doing it on the side. They made the jump. How do they stabilize? How do they expand? So I just, the authenticity of, hey, here's what I did. Here's where I screwed up. Here's where all that sort of deal. So it allowed me to kind of focus on that realm. And so being able to be that authentic, people want to support. And so in the beginning, we did a big Patreon page for those that are subscribing. We've since stopped that for the past year because we're rebuilding a lot of the things that we have. We'll be coming out with a quote unquote membership type situation.
Oh, cool.
But it's more for our community on more dedicated stuff, content that's been recorded in the past for our tech cons, exclusive relationships that I've worked with vendors. So we're working on something similar to that to try and help pay the bills. But really it's the support of the vendors, supportive vendors that our audience love to hear from. And those that are new to the space. I think that a lot of independent software vendors, I like to call them, or emerging MSP vendors, they don't have the capital to maybe attend some of the bigger shows or sponsor some of the more well-known podcasts. So we allow an opportunity for them to appear on the show. We allow them to kind of maybe cover a couple ads in the episodes. And so just to give more some of the brand awareness because of how long we've been around, we have a little bit of, although it's under 3 million, our width is not as great, but our depth is long for how many years we have it. So that's kind of where we kind of get that monetary support, is from the vendor supporting us, and doing it in a way where we don't feel like we're alienating the audience, right? Because if you get pitched and dogged every single episode, like some of these other paid podcasts, and I'm not talking about in our industry, I'm talking about those that are on these paid platforms, and it's like every 3 minutes is an ad. You just stop wanting to listen.
Totally.
Right? So so we try to make that balance, but that's really how we kind of keep the lights on here, make everybody motivated, and how we do our events.
I love it, man. That's so cool. It's good hearing like kind of the back end of what's going on, because I love seeing what you guys are doing. It's so helpful. It's so valuable, and it's got to continue, right? It has to continue. So it's good that it can. And when you guys get that going, I'll definitely subscribe. And looking forward to it. That's awesome. And also, if you have any questions on building a membership site or things like that, like hit me up. You were so helpful when we were doing ScaleCon. Like you, dude, I would text Paco like once a week, and he'd just be like, yeah, this is what we did here, or this is what we did here. And I was like, bro, is this AV quote insane? And you were like, nah, that's just what it is. I was like, yeah. I remember when when we talked about that, I was like, oh my God.
You're like, why? Really? I was like, yeah, it's
$80,000. But we did get a few back, and they look amazing. So I'm like, all right, cool. I guess it was worth the money.
Awesome. Yeah, and sometimes you gotta get creative, right? Like, we were at TechCon this past year. We were like, the hotel gave us this astronomical price for internet for like 10 megs down, and it was like ridiculous. So we partnered with a great vendor that worked out for us, and then they spoke with you. I think they helped you out at your event.
Rhythms was at my event too. Thanks to you guys recommending them. And I was like you. I did not take the internet quote because it was like $12,000 for shitty internet. I'm like, I'll just use the already shitty hotel internet, and
exactly.
Looking back, that would have been horrible for the event. So I'm glad we ended up finding Rhythms. Thanks to you.
Yeah, Rhythms work came very clutch, and shout out to Steve Copeland and Leonard over there. But yeah, that's essentially how we do our thing there. And I'll make sure to have Rick reach out to you, because he's kind of in charge of that whole building of those pieces in the background there.
Love it, man. So when you got started, and I know you already kind of alluded to this earlier, but like, when you got started, what was the biggest challenge back then? And then now, so when you first got started, what was your biggest, maybe the first couple of years, what was your biggest challenge? And then now, like, what is your biggest challenge? And kind of how has that changed over the last 12 years?
Sure. So, it's very interesting, right? So like my biggest issues or concerns in 12 years ago starting, it was just a part-time business, and it was computer repair. So we've kind of gone through these metamorphosis, changes and phases. So from 2013 till 2016, technically that's when the business was part-time, when I was by myself, and wasn't full-time in the business. End of 2016, I was fortunate enough where my job at the time actually moved their engineering department to India because they had 22 offices in the world. So they decided, because it was a pharmaceutical software firm, so a lot of the business is done in Europe anyway. So it just made sense for them to move all the support and engineering to their two India offices. And then because we were after our support technically, so keep it all in there. So they eliminated the department, gave me a good severance. So I was living high and dry. I was like, hey, this is great. I can focus on my full-time thing. And it was
Yeah.
probably one of the worst things that I had happen to me
Mm.
because I got comfortable. And
Yeah.
so at the end of 2017, was just nuts. I mean, so end of 2017, ran out of money, trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. I just started dating my wife at the time. And it was like 2 months in, I get served with this summons for a bad loan that I hadn't paid.
Oh, man.
And that was a whole nother story. And so, and she was like, "Oh, who's ringing the doorbell?" I was like, "Oh, it's just the sheriff trying to serve me a lawsuit. Don't worry about it." So I always say this, and every time I talk about her in this scenario where we literally were rock bottom, where if she could have ran, that was the moment for her to run. But
Mm.
she stuck with me,
Yeah.
and now 8 years in, still by my side, helped me. We were hiding my car from repossession. Like it was just crazy to just make things work full time in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it just ended up being where, I had a bad accident that it allowed me at a job site where I just had to reshift things like, do I really want to do this? And
Mhm.
so I just ended up finally saying, okay, you know what? Let me just go ahead and do this. And then I made like 3 minor changes, and the consistency allowed me to run in after almost 2 years in. So
Mm.
that was really my big struggle back then, was just trying to stabilize this thing, try and figure out how am I going to make this work, and really just get onto a good financial footing just to support myself at the time.
So it was almost like,
Now,
yeah,
yeah,
so it was almost like you weren't desperate enough. Like,
right.
like it was almost like you got comfortable. You weren't. It's amazing what desperation can do to spur action. Like I see it
Hmm.
all the time with MSP camp members who are joining. I'm like, why are you joining? They're like, well, I lost my whale client and like I need to start growing again. And it's like, it takes that unfortunate like anxiety or
Hmm.
desperation to go, oh shit, I gotta go. And then it's funny because when people are in that go mode, what we can do as humans is insane. It's
Right.
insane. Like I remember when I first had my first child, I was like, oh my God, I gotta protect. And like my productivity just skyrocketed because there's the
Yeah.
desperation of I have more than me. I have more than me and my wife.
Yeah.
So what were the 3 tweaks you made back then? You said you made 3 tweaks and things
Yeah.
kind of got going.
So back then, I was charging for my software um quarterly or annually, I think it was at the time. So I changed everything to monthly.
Mhm.
I adopted a couple other additional services that I was able to outsource and partner with other client or other like low voltage cabling, things
Yep.
of that nature.
Yep.
And then I partnered with a bigger MSP who then helped me get more qualified leads that
Cool.
didn't meet their
Yep.
criteria. And then we ran through from there. There's one more. I always forget the 3. Like I say it's 3 and I always remember the 2. And I feel like there was another one outside of those because I feel like the partnership kind of happened. But
Mhm.
I know from making those 3, from doing those monthly billings,
Mhm.
making sure that I partnered with other type of services that I didn't want to do,
Yeah.
because that's where one of the bad accidents happened where I fell and it was a whole big thing. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's kind of the 3 things that I made, and then it kind of just helped me shift on what we were doing. And plus, it was one of those where it was 90 days, so it was like, if I don't do this in 90 days, I'm going back to corporate America. So I
Mm.
also think that motivation of the 90
Yeah.
days allowed me to figure out what we needed to do to kind of push on.
Yeah. Love it. And today, let's fast forward in the last couple years, new challenges, new obstacles. How you facing them?
Yeah, so I think for now, and I think we're in a good spot right now, but still kind of coming off of the tail end of it is, really trying to manage staff and
Mhm.
really, and when I say that, meaning that providing the transparency so that ensuring that all of my team are on the same page
Mm.
so that it doesn't reflect or affect our client base. So
Mm-hmm.
what was happening a lot was, at the beginning, one staff member wouldn't know what the other one was doing. Tickets were in disarray. Our help desk staff at the time, we had internal technicians that we had hired out of Venezuela.
Mm.
And they had been with us for like 4 years, solid guys, but there was some egos kind of going on and some personality challenges that were
Mm.
happening between staff members. And so a lot of that was just affecting the business and the culture.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up having to do was really try to figure that out. And first it was the systems and the processes of trying to figure out, all right, what's happening here? Because clearly my best intention is not working. When I get involved, the things are great. Why can't my team figure out what's going on?
Yeah.
And so, we found out that we had like disjointed systems. So we ended up moving to a unified PSA and RMN platform that kept everybody in the loop for things. We did get rid of some of our very persistent employees,
Mm-hmm.
and much love they had for their work. And so because bad apples, no matter how good they are still bad apples that ruin
Yep.
the entire bunch.
Yep.
So we ended up outsourcing to a outsourced help desk. That took some time to kind of build that whole piece out, to rebuild our own higher level 1/level 2 support field, because there were a lot of stuff that kind of went away when I hadn't done it in the past 4 years. So those are some of the things of the business where operational efficiencies were really suffering for us, and it affected our bottom line. And so
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure all that out, and now we're in a good spot where 2025 we can now get to where the goals that I'm looking to get finally hit that threshold.
Nice. Yeah. And I know how frustrating that whole experience can be. Like, I'm going through it myself. Like, I remember at Alltech, I went through it when I was just a manager. Now as a business owner, I'm going through it. And everyone listening to this that has employees knows what you just had to go through. But the fact is, when you're over the hump, you oftentimes really are over the hump. That's the crazy thing about starting to hire employees, is like, once you kind of get over and you get the right processes, you get the right people, a bad person sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
And we're definitely at that spot now. And I just want to take a second here just for all of us to like understand what happens. And I'm not the most mature business owner. Like, I've not been doing this long. There's just one observation I think I'm confident enough to make, whereas a lot of people have a lot more experience than me. But this point I need to make, and I think people can empathize with it. There's this thing that happens with every business. I've seen every business I worked at, and now here it's like, sometimes you get a shitty employee. A shitty employee is doing shitty things, and then we put rules on everybody to try and manage that one shitty or two shitty employee.
Right.
And it's not fair. And it happens it happens in all over the regulation, laws in general. Even a dumb law usually comes from someone doing something dumb. And I just don't do that. Like, I have an unlimited work from home policy. I have an unlimited PTO policy. I don't have these like check-ins. I don't micromanage. What I do is I give people clear structure, and I give them what we need. I give them a project board, and then like they just get it done. And if somebody is abusing or they're dropping the ball, I don't change rules for everybody that can work in that autonomy. I just
Right.
fire the person that sucks.
Right.
That's it. And like we're too afraid oftentimes to fire people, and it hurts us. And what happens, instead of just hurting us, it also hurts all of our other employees, because they now get more rules. They get now more workload. They now get their energies drained because there's a drainer in the business. Like, I'm
Right.
one of the nicest people in the world. I hate being mean to people. I care a lot about people's feelings, but I care a whole lot more about my good employees than a shitty employee that's not working out. So I pluck them quick. And I just think that's super important for people. Like, it may not be your processes. It may be a bad person. And
Right.
sometimes you got to get that person out, because if it's hurting you and your business and your employees, like, got to get them out. Almost every time I've had to fire somebody, it was at Alltech and MSP Camp. It has made us way better. Same as a shitty client. Every time I've had to fire a shitty client, it's made the business better, and all of us are people better. So I just wanted to take a second and like just harp on that a little bit, because we just hold on tight.
Yeah.
to people we shouldn't, because we're nice people, because we care, but it actually, it's the opposite. It's hurting.
And some, and just to carry that even further, sometimes you realize that it could be you as well as the business
Mm,
owner, right?
yeah.
Because, sometimes you fired the wrong person when you realize you let them down or you set them
Yeah.
up for failure.
Yep.
So we had did that, right? So same as you, we've had those similar scenarios where, and it took a while to understand, like, I'm the same way as you. Like, hey, we have a great culture here. I'm giving you what you need to do until something gets royally screwed and I have to get involved. Then I'm going to figure out what's happening.
Yep.
But other than that, handle what you need to do. And so, firing people sucks, but your business failing is worse, is even worse. But
Mhm.
sometimes, you get it wrong too. And so that
Yeah,
happened to us as
totally.
well, where we had fired an employee where we, after much, looking into and understanding that, me as a business owner failed this employee.
Mhm.
And we overloaded her. We assumed she was going to be able to do all these things and never really giving her the guardrails or the ability to grow into these roles.
Yeah.
And that was just essentially the mindset of where I was in the business as well. So we ended up rehiring her. And this was, she was hired. She was fired like 8 months in, and then because I hire slow, fire fast. But
Mm.
that one was a regret of mine, and we rehired her. And now 3 years later, she's one of our best employees.
Wow,
And
that's
so
amazing.
it's understanding. Again, it's that whole put. If you expect a fish to climb a tree, you're going to lose every single time, right?
Totally.
Understand the capabilities of why you hired this person and let them thrive, and that's one of those learning experiences as well as a business owner.
I could not agree more. And one way to kind of vet that a little bit, and this is just one way I found, again, I only have experience as a manager and a business owner for like a year. So everyone take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But one thing I've found is super direct. There's a book called Radical Candor, which I love, because it's like, you don't have to, we don't like, the sandwich method may not be as good as we think it is, right? Like
Mm.
sometimes we just have to be super direct with the person that we're not happy with and be
Right.
very clear as to, hey, I think, and I'm super direct with my people, like extremely direct, never mean, but like, hey, this is exactly what I think we need to work on and why. Give me your thoughts. And sometimes they will tell you, I think the process is broken. It's like, perfect. But the big way to do it is like, if you both agree on an actionable plan, like these are the steps that are going to be taken, and then a week later those steps have not been taken, that's when I know,
Yeah.
okay, it's not that there's anything wrong with process or whatever. You're just not going to do what we need you to do. And
Right.
that's kind of like, because if someone's putting a lot of effort in and they really care, I mean, I give them a shitload of grace. I'm like, dude, you care. You may not know. We may need to work on
Right.
the process, but I can tell it's there, and you really want to move yourself forward and the business forward. I'm going to keep you no matter what.
Yeah.
It's just the true lack of caring and the saying, okay, these things we said we're going to do, and we did not do them. Why not? Right. And then it's like excuse city, and it's like, okay, cool. You're not a fit for the culture. We got to keep moving. But
Right.
that's such a
Exactly.
cool story, Paco. I'm glad you shared that, because you're right. It happens on both sides 100%.
Yep. Absolutely.
So moving in a little bit to, this is the No Fluff MSP Marketing Podcast. We often talk about growth, but I love
Yeah.
your, love your story and everything so far. So let's talk about your growth a little bit. How you obviously grown enough to have employees, which is significant. What are you doing what have you done to grow your business in the last few years, and kind of what are you doing now?
Sure. So, what we've kind of found a lot of success in is, you always hear, hey, join your local chamber of commerce, um, join your Rotary Club. And I always have found like a lot of those chambers, at least the bigger ones in the area, my personal experience, and no harm to any of the Chicago chambers that are listening to this, but to me, it's like, we'll take your fee, we'll give you to a couple breakfasts, a couple networking opportunities, and we'll highlight you in a newsletter, and that's it, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Sometimes they often have so many members, they can't understand what you do and who you do, and there's so many of you, and there's probably someone more longer tenure that had built a relationship with the chamber that's
Mhm.
kind of cruxed in there if it's a long owned organization. So sometimes it just depends on where you go, but it tends to be you get lost in the crowd, right?
Mhm.
So where I found a lot of success is partnering with associations.
Mm.
Associations will act like a chamber, especially area ones, But they're a little bit more scrappier because they're not getting the dollars that they would normally get from the SBA or as a chamber, because usually they'll have an SBA center and have provide all these resources because they've been designated as the chamber from their local alderman, at least in Chicago.
Mm.
So for us, when we started really trying to grow, we partnered with an association that was competing as a chamber. And so found a lot of great rapport there. It was an area association in that downtown area. Knew the executive director from a previous nonprofit that I had served on. We had a great rapport. And so it kind of allowed us to join as a member, see where we can provide value, because, you know, if someone was already there, I'm not trying to step on toes. Maybe there's a way to partner. And so nobody was really there to help provide that, hey, here's education for the area. You can kind of make me the guy now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the go-to quote unquote SME, subject matter expert.
Mm-hmm.
So that allowed us to build relationship with the association, all the members. They started seeing me as part of like the attracting act, or, you know, the highlight of whatever event that may be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would do a tech talk, and kind of move forward from there. And then it allowed me to partner with several bigger MSPs who were trying to join the association just to have the logo on the website for their brand awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we built out our first clients, and how we got a lot of a lot of the marketing dollars that we probably could not have afforded at the time. They had that budget. They were pushing out for those keywords. They were pushing out through those efforts, attracting clients that were my size,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't want to take on. So then they passed them on very warm for me to just close them. So if I
Nice.
couldn't close them, either they didn't understand the value or I just sucked. And so it was either a bad day or something of that, which is why I had to go, you know, I'm an engineer at heart. So I had to go through formal sales training to
Yeah.
understand how to make a sale,
Yeah.
how the psychology of sale goes and things of that nature. So that's what kind of started my growth from word of mouth, and then just joining associations. And then I had did a program at the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which was called Coaching for Growth, which is kind of like a mini Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business. I forgot what they call that program. Goldman Sachs 10K. Anyway, but there is a business that's in the US that's called the Goldman Sachs 10K for business. And so they had a mini version of that at this chamber that was sponsored by Goldman Sachs and Bank of America. So they ended up going through that program. And so I realized that, okay, I didn't join the Illinois Chamber of Commerce because of how big it is. The Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce kind of like niched down. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if there are Hispanic associations in the verticals that I'm trying to get into. And lo and behold, there were.
Cool.
So there was the Hispanic Association of Construction, and then the Hispanic Lawyer Association Institute or something like that. So since I already had, okay, I have these two specific ones, and I'm going into employment law, concrete construction workers, I already kind of knew where my segments were. I just had to plug myself in from there. So joining these associations, joining a council that was similar to like a BNI that had one specific person for each one, it just aligned with what I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that's how we've been growing and attracting clients, because they now see my name, they see me around, they see a face. And that's been really helpful for me as I kind of move forward with growing our clientele. Even this past week where I attended 2 holiday parties, you know, we had 5 very warm leads that came out of it just because of conversation, building relationships. And then they just started seeing our great content we started posting the last several months from the, MSP camp.
Yeah. Dang, man. And this is just going back to the beginning of the conversation where you know who you're serving, like you know who you're going after. So you know exactly what associations you're going to look for.
No.
Like someone listening to this right now that's a total generalist, which Alltech was a generalist, but we kind of honed in on a couple. But generally it's gonna be hard. Well, which ones do I join? But you're like, okay, these are the 3 verticals. Let me see what they have. And then these are 3 verticals with the sub of Latin community. So it's like, wow, like you have a target. You got into that target. You've being yourself. You're being authentic. You become the thought leader in these organizations. And it's clear who they trust, who they like, and who they're going to go to.
Right.
And then
it's like they say, people hate to be sold, but they love to buy.
That's such a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yep. And I can't take credit for that one. That was It's from the book, the Little Red Book. I forgot the gentleman who wrote it. It's Jeff something or Jeremy something. But it's called the Little Red Book of Sales, and one of the key books that I've read that allowed me to kind of know these certain things and the way people in a sales culture at least think of. Because sometimes we just get kind of worried, or we kind of get scared of sales.
Yes.
And a friend of mine, Victor Antonio, who runs an entire like sales academy and things like that, he mentioned to me, he's like, the problem with sales is that everyone thinks sales is a dirty word because of the people who try to do certain tactics in sales. But all sales really is a nudge.
Yeah.
Is how many nudges can you make before you complete what is known as the sale?
Yeah.
So someone that's got a great restaurant, and they like, I've been going to these. I don't know if you've ever been to like one of these hot pot restaurants. They're like called shabu shabu. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So me and my wife have been like, well, she blames me that I've been more on the kick than her, but we've been doing this in Korean barbecue a lot lately, and so for me, it's like I had my buddy who is also very loves food and all its natures and all their different varieties. So I was like, look, you got to go to this place. This place is awesome. He's like, oh, well, I got my own place in Schaumburg, which is a neighboring suburb. And I was like, no, you got to come to Chinatown. We got to and he's from Chinatown. He's like, okay, I'm going to give you credit. And so when we went down there, he was like, man, you did not undersell this at all. But it's about that. It's the conversations. Again, people buy from who they trust and like. Again, people love to buy, they just hate to be sold. And that's a big key takeaway to try and figure out, all right, how can I present this so that it doesn't seem like, because you can breathe desperation from a long mile away. Totally. So if you're able to figure that out, it's a great skill to have.
I love when I'm in the sales meeting and someone tells me something I don't want to hear. Like, anytime I'm on a sales call and somebody's just saying everything I say, they just like are so agreeable and like they're just so like 100%. We do this and this and this and this, and it's like, okay. But I love when I'm talking to a true salesperson that's like, well, actually, that wouldn't work because of this, right? Like or even the product has it, but I don't recommend it because the way you're doing it is this. Like the minute they can give me something of value as if they're a consultant, that's when I trust them almost immediately, right? Because they're not just trying to get me to say yeah. They don't want to just say yes to me. That's really how I was in sales. I was extremely disarming, like, because fortunately we had the benefit of getting a lot of leads. So I really was never desperate, right? Like I never really went into the meeting desperate, and like they could just feel it. Like I was just there helping out, like really understanding what they needed, really telling them how we may or may not be able to help. And like, it was just extremely disarming. Like I always treated it as if I was the CIO at that company. Like, and we were having a leadership meeting, and I was the IT liaison to the leadership meeting. That's how I always treated in the meetings. And when you act like that and they truly think you are that liaison to their technology, they go, oh, I can't lose this person.
Right.
Like the way they consulted me is how I like my CFO to consult me, and how I like my COO to consult me. Like that's how they are consulting me. And I don't want to lose that because the other person I just talked to was a salesperson. Right. And so I just love your perspective there.
Well, there's a key piece that you just said, right? Is like, you should be doing this, at least in my opinion. You want to help people. Like you have a service that can help them. Like, yeah, you can get into this business to make money, but eventually you're going to run out that well dry, or you're going to have a high churn rate. But if you're going into it where you hear, like, if you're not asked, like if you go into a sales meeting here and your first question isn't, all right, well, tell me what's going on. Yeah. Like you've lost. Yeah. Like if you're already, hey, we do this, they can give a flying F if what that could be for you. But the moment you go in and you're like, hey, what's going on? Tell me, like, and let's see if we're a fit. Yeah. Because now you've this it's objection blocking. It's like, how do I disarm them, as you just said, as much as possible to like, all right, let's see if we're a fit. Oh, well, he understands that we may not work together. Okay, cool. And then, hey, here's what it is. I just had this on-site discovery that we went through, and I said, all right, great. I think your problems are this. Let's attack these, and then we can talk about the managed services. And she just looked at me dumbfounded, like, I'm so surprised that you didn't move and say, hey, we got to take you on as an MSP client, work on these projects. Like you said, all right, let's figure out these, and then we'll see if you're a good fit for us to be a client. She's like, I'm immediately going to sign whatever you send me. So it's the ability of hearing. Yeah, exactly. The ability to hear what they're saying and then actually addressing what they asked you for goes so much further than you having a sales sheet or you being able to have it all nice and buttoned up, at least in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And as you're building out your good clientele, or you're and trying to get as many good pumpkins as much as possible,
Yes.
and getting
Yeah.
rid of all the other ones, which,
The pumpkin
you know,
plan. Oh, I love it.
yeah, that's what we started in the last 2 years is, how do we do this, right? Because again, doing those numbers, it's hard to see where you're like, all right, cool, well, 60-75% of my, or 70% of our revenue is coming from our top 10 clients. Why am I dealing with the other 30 clients here if they're just going to provide us not to say some are pain in the ass clients, but like, why divert your attention to all these other businesses? You love them, but there's so much more you could do for these other 10.
Yep.
And so how do you replace these good dollars with bad dollars?
Yep.
Or I'm sorry, replace these bad dollars with good dollars. Don't do what Paco listen to Paco what says, don't do what Paco does. But anyway, that sort of deal, and making sure that you provide that customer experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We were huge on the pumpkin plan, and we trimmed a lot of bad pumpkins, which is hard to do because it's hard to make sales in the MSP space. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. Like vendors love making it seem easy. Like, oh, just cut all these people. It's like, I know, but I worked so fucking hard to get like the one way, and I just love the way you're kind of posing this. How I kind of visualized it when I was talking to someone, especially someone new. Like, you really got to hear a lot from somebody before you can even start to diagnose, right? Like, what's one of the biggest complaints when you go to the doctor's office? You say a couple things, the doctor starts saying shit. Like, here's what's going on. You're like, no, let me. So what I would do is I was like almost visualize like a meter, and it's like the more words they say, the higher the meter starts going up. And if you can respond as close to the the top of the meter is when you're going to be most prepared to do well. Some people, they'll get a couple ammo, they'll get a little bit of ammo in the meter, and then just boom, dump it. And thinking, okay, well, your chance now, and if you look at the whole meter, of actually having an impact is extremely low. Like, I went a lot of, there's times I would be talking, that people would be talking for 20, 30 minutes. And all I have to do is maybe ask one more question or two more. Well, honestly, a lot of questions in that 20, 30 minutes, but it's all questions so I can keep filling the meter up and truly understanding where they're at before I say anything about anything. Right. And what do people love doing? They love talking about themselves, and they love talking about their business. So this is not a hard thing to do. Just look at Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like, this has been the same since the 40s. So like, just let the person talk about them. Not only are they going to like you more, you're going to get more to respond. Like, we can't, like, I know people will just show up to the meeting with an hour-long presentation. They want to just give right away. It's like, you don't even know what the problem is yet.
Right.
So I just love your perspective going into that.
And sometimes you have to guide that conversation, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes they're just there. So like, coming prepared, and like, you should be asking yourself, what are the most common questions, or what you need to find out? So we like have a 23 question questionnaire discovery questionnaire that we have all the time. And then when we ask the question, hey, what's going on? Oftentimes they've already filled out half of those questions, and I'm just writing them down. And then I'm like, all right, well, I have a couple of other questions. They don't know I have these 23 questions, nor I'm like, all right, I have questions for you. You just let them go. And that's the most natural. And that's how they feel it heard. But you also get the information where you can properly propose to them what they need.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I would say on that is sometimes MSPs in the sales process, they'll send like a technical questionnaire, which is, I know, not what you're talking about here. I just seen this. So I want to make a warning to people. Like, they'll say like, well, what switches do you have? And what fucking access points do you have? And what are you using, Hyper-V or VMware? And I'm just like, never, ever, 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 never talk to the prospect with that stuff. Just say, hey, there's some technical questions I'm going to ask your MSP, or I can get when I'm on site.
Right.
Done. Get over it. Don't send them that shit. And it's so funny because the engineers are always like, well, we need all this information before you go on the sales call. I'm like, no. No, I don't need to do any of this. Like, we're going to get that before we onboard. We're going to get that so I know what products I need to swap out on the quote. But like, that is sometimes the questionnaire MSPs will bring to the sales meeting. It's like, wow, yeah, don't do that. It's not a lot, but I've seen it. And it's like, just don't do that. Like, you can, when you're on site, just write it down. Okay, take some pictures. It's fine.
Yeah, right.
You're going to connect you with the MSP anyway. Like, you'll get the credentials you need. You'll get the stuff from the other MSP. Like, they like that you're going to be the middleman. They don't want to have to go ask these questions. MSP, you get to say, hey, I'm gonna handle all that. Let me. I'm gonna go. So now we just have a couple more minutes. I want to get your bag. That's what I've been calling it lately. The bag. I want to hear about your bag, your big ass goal for 2025, Paco? What's your bag?
Yeah, so 2025, I think everyone has so, through this whole journey, you know, the goal has always been, all right, how do I make it how can I make an achievement? Because I'm always thinking, like, to me, I'm a steward of the MSP community, right? Like, I'm trying to figure out, all right, how do I do this in a way that other people can replicate and repeat this without all the fluff that's
Yep.
in the industry, right? Because
Yep.
I do truly believe there is so many different ways to get to the certain areas that you are in your business. You don't have to charge X amount for per user. You don't have to do things a specific way to achieve success.
Yep.
So, every phase of my journey is like, all right, part-time to full-time, full-time stabilize employees, transition to outsource help desk and outsourcing, and how does that whole thing work? The next goal is, hitting the million, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we are under a million in the MSP right now, which surprises a lot of people, just because there's so many things going on and things of that nature. But I think being able to hit past that million, which is probably the first time I've mentioned that publicly,
Mm.
is being able to hit that million and being able to come back and say, hey, you can hit six figures and you should be able to hit six figures, and here's how to do it.
Yeah.
So it took me 12 years to do this. Let's see if you could do it in 5. Let's see if you
Yeah.
could do it in 3. To those that are starting with nothing and don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my big piece for that. Because I always hear that once you hit the first million, then it's going to be a struggle to get to the 5. Once you get to the 5, then that's where it gets fun.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, when it gets you to 3, and then when it gets to 3 to 5, that's where you start to have to figure out your
Yep.
stuff, dial it
Yep.
down, and then
Yep.
get to the point from there. So,
Yep.
but yeah, man, that's my big ass goal, is to getting to a point where I can report this back to all of my community followers, and then hopefully they'll find as much success as I have as well.
I love that your community is part of your motivation, and I feel that. I feel that hard, dude. Like, I have to market my business well, not just because I want to grow, but because I have hundreds of people that look to me as for marketing advice. So if I'm talking about all the things you should do and then I am not doing it or I'm not having success with it, it makes me look bad. And it's so great because it's that extra motivation I need to be like, yeah, we have to scale. We have to scale fast. We have to have members that scale so they can show that what we do works. Like, you have to have all of those things behind your back. And you're saying, I want to get to 7 figures because I know that I'm talking about how to do it, and I can be even more acquainted to talk to our members about it and give them the tools they need to succeed. Like, what wonderful values, what wonderful, like, true altruistic type motivation of getting there. And also, it's just dope to get there, but like,
Right. Just to
having
say I
that,
did,
yeah, like having that positive reason behind it is huge. Like, when I think about ScaleCon, I was like, okay, we're about to do this event, and like, we got to market this like it's the event of the century. I'm like, because if
Yeah.
not, and we have 20 people show up and we say we're a marketing company and we can't even market our own damn event, it's going to be embarrassing. You know what I'm saying? So like, it adds an
Yeah.
extra, like, all right, this is it. Like, we can't F this up. So man, I love that that's your bag for 2025. Any other goals or anything for 2025? Any thoughts? Anything you're excited about, nervous about?
Just for, as far as on the MSP side, I think that's one of our big goals. And, there's some other things in there, like, figuring out how we're going to get ahead of a lot of these infrastructure changes for a lot of our clients that are going to be coming up in the new year, adopting these, really speaking with our clients, speaking with more, because we're really going all in on the construction space right now and the employment law firm law space. So we're doing things like we're sponsoring events, but now we're actually, like, it's my first time translating everything that I've done in MSP Unplugged into my business. So
Mm.
sponsoring events and actually having a booth and having an experience at the booth as the MSP,
Mm-hmm.
creating my own event
Mm-hmm.
as the MSP to attract
Cool.
other small businesses,
Yeah.
like a technology fair event situation,
Yep.
attending construction shows and figuring out what are the opportunities there to be displayed as an exhibitor, right?
Yeah.
And then really just focusing on creating those webinars that are easy for MSPs because I know what an MSP wants, but for my segment, trying to dive more into those and reaching out with my association. So there's a lot of new things we're doing. But the bag would be essentially to get to that one goal for us from there. MSP Unplugged is a little different. We're reimagining some things that scare the heck out of me. So
Tell us about
it. So I won't reveal too much because we're going to make this announcement in January. But what I will say is that I've let all our vendor partners know that we have reimagined TechCon Unplugged. There's been a lot of rumors about that, where we're going to be. Is it going to be in Chicago? Is it going to be in Dallas? Is it going to be, where's TechCon Unplugged 2025? What I will say, and I will leave you with this as our little teaser until January when we make the announcement, is just know that we are working on a way to bring a little bit of TechCon to you. And so that's where I will leave that for everyone to listen. And we will be revealing all those, and it's going to be a great time. And maybe we might be coming a little earlier than what we have for your first dose. So that'll be the little hint I'll drop for any of our podcast listeners that do listen to your show as well. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of messages about what the heck is going on. So yeah, that's what I can review on there. But we got a lot of cool stuff coming on. We've rumored about, like, again, these membership portals and things of that nature that we're going to be to help our clients out, our community members. And then I think everyone knows now that Corey joining on has been a great opportunity for another perspective coming on as well.
Man, that's awesome. I love it. Love seeing everything going on. Love following y'all's journey. Love you, Rick, Corey. It's great. Keep it up. I know your listeners get a lot of value. The events are super fun. I've been to the last two. Well, Paco, really appreciate you being on, man. This was a great conversation. I know it's going to really help and inspire a lot of the listeners. So if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for being on. And to the listeners, we'll see you on the next one.